Welcome to the Mason Dukacek Show. This episode is brought to you by Workforce Alchemy, helping leaders improve hiring, engagement, and retention while uncovering people-related profit leaks hidden in everyday operations. Today's guest is Jacob Crockett. He's a CEO of Hire Aligned and a strong advocate for a culture-first approach to hiring that goes deeper than resumes, skill lists, or gut instinct. Jacob, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. Really excited to be here.
Tell us a little bit about how your organization started.
Yeah, so I started Hire Aligned about 16 months ago now. Really, it came from some personal experiences that me and a co-founder had where we had both experienced great alignment on teams where we loved who we worked with. We loved the work we were doing. You know, we were motivated by similar things and viewed the world in the similar ways. And we'd experienced also great misalignment. And we'd realized what that felt like. And really set out to, is there a way to build a world where people love what they do and they thrive on teams? Because when people love what they do and they thrive on teams, then everything's better. The business runs better. People are happier. The world is a better place. And so that's really what we started out doing. I've spent my whole career in data science, right? AI before it was cool. And really, it's only been the last couple of years since LLMs have come out that we're able to use free text.
LLMs is a technical term that not everyone's going to know.
Yeah. So large language models, ChatGPT. So ChatGPT, right? It's a large language model. You can talk to it and it seems like it understands everything you're saying. And so there's just been some awesome changes, even in the last month. Technology is evolving that makes what we're trying to do even more effective. And so really at the end of the day, how can we enhance the human experience of work by using AI and all the cool tech? But really it's all about how do we make the human experience more meaningful?
Cool. So when you talk about culture matching, what do most leaders misunderstand right out of the gate?
Yeah, they misunderstand the importance of being accurate on what your culture actually is. And so to, kind of set the stage, our working definition of culture is that culture is the shared beliefs and experiences of a group of people. And so culture is not like who people cheer for, in the Super Bowl. Culture is not their favorite like bowling alley or, their like favorite TV shows. That adds to the shared experience, but culture is often what we talk about. It's the deeper motivations, the ways people view the world. People can share deep desires and motivations and vote for and have entirely different political leanings. There's a deeper level that often isn't seen, and so people aren't accurate with where they actually are, and who they are and who they want to be. And so it's really hard to be good at identifying and bringing on people to your team who align with your culture when you don't even know what it is.
So how do you find culture in a way that is concrete enough to be able to use as a baseline in higher decisions?
Yeah. So I always like to talk about this in if you abstract from the technology, how would you do this? So, right, if I were to come to a Chick-fil-A and I wanted to figure out what is the culture at this Chick-fil-A. Hey, here's what it is. Here's what people think it is online. I would sit down with every single team member and ask them, hey, tell me about a time you didn't get along with somebody. What happened? Like, how was it resolved? Tell me about a time you went above and beyond in your job. How were you recognized? And if they, there's all these behavioral interview questions, I'd ask a handful to every single team member. Take a lot of notes, try to pull out themes. And then really a human can only do this for, if they're really good, maybe 10 people. Because as soon as you start to get all of those stories, it becomes too much to hold in our heads at once. But you can do this for a small group of people where it's like, okay, what are the things that motivate, right? If I ask, tell me about a time you went above and beyond in your job and how were you recognized? Somebody's like, yeah, I stayed after my shift to clean up this mess that was spilled. Like it wasn't my fault, but I stayed to do it. And my manager, gave me a free sandwich coupon or something. Like awesome. Cool. So in this situation, what is rewarded and what is viewed as, above and beyond is helping out, like being aware and helping out. Whereas somebody else might say, yeah, when I went above and beyond in my job, it was, I recognized that like the way we were, the order that we were doing the building a sandwich, like wasn't the best order. So I tried something else and it made it worse, but then it helped us realize, oh, here's actually how we can make it better. And now it's better. And, and then they gave me $1 raise. Like that's a totally different story. And so helping to understand the way that an organization works and thinks, that's really how you get at the culture in quantifiable ways that you can pull out these themes and measure it. Where technology makes this really, really easy is now if anybody listening were to like try to do this with their team, they ask them some questions or they have a discussion, take the transcript and just throw it into ChatGPT, like a ton of data or a survey, throw it into ChatGPT and ask it to pull out like, hey, what do we value? What motivates us? And it does a really good job of being able to crunch like 800 responses from people that then you can pull out these meaningful things and start to quantify it to say, okay, well, if we say we value this, how much do we actually live up to this? And is this the thing that we should be aiming towards? Or is this just not authentic at all? And so there's a lot of fun things you can do there, but really it's, can you get stories and then use technology to help quantify that is how we're able to get at more of a real concrete definition of culture and what exists.
So how do you use AI to identify how people compare to that baseline? Once you've got a baseline built, how do you identify how people compare to it?
Yeah. So, if you were to try to make your own duct tape version of what we do, what you do is you'd send out some survey asking people to share these stories. You'd pull those in, you'd dump it into ChatGPT and say, hey, can you identify what my culture is? And can you make a rubric, a really detailed rubric to determine how somebody aligns with our culture and our team? We break it into a couple different categories to make it really simple, but you could just, a rubric. When you think of like interview science, the best way to do a job interview, which nobody does, is, hey, we're going to, here's our score sheet. Here's what we care about and we're going to rate them, 1 through 5. Or, some people say it's a 1 through 7 or a 1 through 4 so that you can't be neutral. But every single one of those rating buckets has to have a definition of what does it look like for somebody to be a 3 on proactivity or a 4 or a 1. And nobody goes through the effort to do that because it's hard and awkward. But that's what this rubric should look like. And then you have a candidate come in and you get them to tell stories. And then they also and then they get thrown into this AI and it is able to pull through and go run through this rubric. And it's less about the scoring and more about the qualitative data that comes out of it to say, how do they align? Or, hey, what areas are worth digging into more to help figure out like, hey, is this was this just they didn't tell the right story? Or really kind of the aim of what we've built is if you imagine, and we're trying to figure out the best way to explain this still, but if you imagine an Iron Man suit with, that has Jarvis, that, the AI that he just can tell something and it goes and does it. The Iron Man suit takes a person and gives them superpowers and lets them do things and enhances who they are and what they're trying to do. And so we've really just built this to be an Iron Man suit for somebody on a team to be able to recruit, not just screen and hire, but to recruit somebody and build the human relationships that enhance the experience of both parties so that the work experience is better. That when they hire them, they're already on a better start. When they don't hire them, they still have a great relationship and that person wants to come work there still. And kind of enters into this bench idea and really just being able to change fundamentally the way that we view hiring and the way that we view the relationships that we have with people. It's growing and changing so much, and it's a blast to see how it changes organizations.
So I'm sure there are people listening right now who have varying degrees of understanding of AI and its uses, and whether it is a asset or a threat or a
Yeah.
little of both. There's still that ambiguity out there. And I know critics are quick to say things like, this could cost me my job, or are we treating people like robots? is this what about the human element? Because I know there are some companies that have gone to the extreme of AI, and this isn't what you guys do, but I had a friend that was a high-level executive in HR who went through an entire recruiting process and was interviewed by AI and never talked to a real person. And they withdrew their candidacy because I'm a human and I don't wanna work in an environment where I just talk to robots all day. I want to so if that's the extreme and doing everything manually is the other extreme, where do you how would you describe where you fall in and how would you describe how the work you do impacts the people that are in those doing those roles right now?
Yeah. It's a really good question. And I don't know if anybody knows the answer, but kind of
That's
what
fair
I've,
because I don't. That's why I ask because there's the extreme
yeah,
of manual, old school, do everything. I mean, review resumes with your hands and they're
in a
printed out
highlighter.
and
Yeah.
make highlighter and make notes. And then there's, hey, an applicant's not going to talk to a real human until way down the process when an offer is made, if then.
Yeah.
So fair enough.
So, yeah, it varies greatly depending on the industry that you're in. And if you think back to kind of COVID time hiring compared to now, in COVID time hiring, almost anybody could jump jobs wherever they wanted because it is just hard to find people, it seemed, and and make $30,000 more. Now people are applying for months and never get any word back. And that's kind of the general white collar sentiment in the job market. There's still industries where it's really hard to hire people. It's hard to find people who are good and fit and that you're excited to hire. And so where it becomes interesting is on both of those spectrums, how do you build something that works for both of those? What we see is how can we take, all of kind of the traditional steps in a hiring process and identify what things matter for the human connection to help the candidate feel like they're cared about, as hokey as it sounds, loved, that they're wanted, that their job's gonna be awesome when they get there. And how do you make it so that it doesn't take a million people to do that? Because it would take a dozen recruiters to go through. If you were to post a software engineering role today, remote, you'd have 1,000 applicants within a couple hours. Nobody that I've ever talked to is like, I went through every single one. They're like, I just, when I was ready, jumped in and looked at the most recent 10 or whatever, or, sorted it based off of something. Really, our approach is how can we, on that spectrum of like full robot to full human, it's how can we build a world where the humans are doing the things that are most fulfilling and meaningful and for both parties and doing as little of the work that isn't. And so where this becomes really cool that you can use AI is AI is able to, take and do things and serve it up on a platter to be like, "Hey Mason, here's these two people that you need to call on the phone right." Or, "Hey, here's these things that you need to do. Hey, also maybe you should ask these questions in your human interview. Here's a few things that you should ask and dig into." And it's super cool to see where that balance can be. And our aim is really, can we build a world where everybody can work a little bit less and love their jobs more and everybody makes more money?
So what are the most common culture mismatches that you see that lead to early turnover and disengagement?
Uh, it really, that's a great question. It varies greatly depending on how the team works. But a lot of the most common mismatches that we see have to do with expectation and almost always unspoken expectation. Where if a manager, is actually a micromanager, but doesn't realize it and they hire somebody and they don't let them know during the hiring process that like, hey, I'd like you to check in every day and let me know what you're working on, then that's an immediate sort of mismatch. But also it becomes, especially in bigger organizations, where there's a certain level of a game that's played to get a promotion, to get a raise, and often the game is just as much a part of the day to day work as the actual work is, and yet nobody talks about the game, and that's something that can cause great mismatch very quickly. I had a boss 10 years ago that got hired in kind of as a middle manager spot in an R&D group that I was a part of, and awesome human, like great at what he does. He thrived before and thrived after because he wasn't clearly told, hey, we actually don't play any of these corporate games here. We just care about getting stuff done. He flunked out because he showed up expecting it to operate like other places and it didn't. And so it was a great mismatch. So yeah, really the expectation, I think, and misalignment is the biggest thing.
What types of organizations benefit most from the culture matching that you do, and which ones struggle to apply it effectively?
The this sounds kind of rude. The smarter someone thinks they are, or the smarter an organization thinks they are, the harder they have implementing it.
Why is that?
We as humans are really bad at interviewing, like really bad. We pretty much just hire who we think who we'd be friends with. And it was like last I looked, and you probably know this stat better than I do, but there was like a less than a 20% reliability on human interviews, right? The fact that if I think that you're going to be good at your job, the likelihood that I'm right is less than 20% over a span of time. And it's just,
I'm
we
going to
like to think,
piggyback.
hey, we're great at this.
I'm going to piggyback on something that you said right there about being liked. I have been in rooms with executives and frontline supervisors, and the frontline supervisors are making a case. And I understand why, because they feel overworked and they're short staffed and everyone's being strained. And I understand their sense of urgency to get help. Get that. That being said, I've watched those supervisors argue on behalf of people that when the use of psychometric assessment was validated, the psychometric assessment tools tell them this is not a good fit for a whole long list of reasons. That you're basically asking someone to come to work every day and be something they're not. And when faced with that evidence from these assessment tools and and that's not just that, but the entire package, in faced with that evidence, they're like, but I really, really like them. I really, really like them. I mean, like, that's the reason to hire them, because I really, really like them. Not, hey, here's all of this evidence that suggests that the person is a great fit and has a track record and can do the job. It's, I really, really like them. So what you're saying is very much a sweet spot, but I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, you're good. Right. It's like, unless they're a waiter and their job is 99% have people like you, it's not the most important part of the job because, obviously, agreeableness is something they rate super high in salespeople because it's like, hey, can you adapt to whoever you're talking with? Um, but yeah, humans are just really bad at interviewing. And so the people who've done it a lot and think they're really good at it are less likely to be helped by this. There's also some organizations that have spent a lot of time and money investing in figuring out who they want to be and have aligned everything around it. Cricket, for example, the scrapbook machine, a cutting machine, we wanted to work with them. And we talked to them and, we're like getting close to a pilot. And we're like, hey, to be honest, I don't know if this will help you at all because everybody there at their company knows all of their core values. They're citing everything in all their meetings. Like it's a part of who they are. And their hiring process reflects that. And so we're like, look, for the top 5% of organizations, this probably isn't useful. One, because they wouldn't use it. And two, they they already have most of the benefit. But for a lot of other companies out there where, their core values are something that are either just on the wall or they have to like look them up to remember it. It's so useful for them with such a little lift in like mental impact for the things they have to think through and worry about. And so it's really just, hey, how can we help these people who haven't been paying attention to these things? Maybe it's just the thing they talk about once a year in their all hand, but actually bringing in that aspect of culture and identity and values and who they are in a way that is immediately applicable.
I still am so hung up on the what you said about the people doing the interviewing. And as interviewers, their decisions are only as sound as the facts in which they're based, and people lie in resumes and applications all the time.
Yeah.
And if you see videos that pop up on my reels and shorts all the time about, oh, how to answer this interview question, how to answer that interview question, how to beat your interviewer, how to position yourself perfectly. Oh, here's a book you need to read. These poor interviewers really are at a disadvantage if they're playing by the rule set or assuming the rule set exists that, hey, when I ask a question, I'm going to get an honest answer
Yep.
or honest reflection of what you do. And I think by default, they're at a disadvantage from the get go. So I really like how you're talking about AI assisted. And I love your imagery of Iron Man and asking Jarvis, give me superpowers so that I can do a better job. And that certainly would level the playing field because the applicants certainly are using AI and they're certainly reading the books and they're certainly watching these videos telling them how to give the perfect answers to each interview question. So, as far as I'm concerned, you're leveling the playing field for those involved in hiring. So, I'm wondering how culture matching changes as a company grows from maybe a small team to a larger, more complex organization. So how often do you need to reassess the baseline for jobs as a culture shifts or evolves?
Yeah. So the way that we do this is we have the existing team go through one of these kind of story assessments, right? It's not there's no right or wrong answers. It's just, hey, tell us about your experiences. And because it's AI, if somebody, it asks, hey, tell me about a time you were proud to be a part of a team, and they were like, well, yesterday, it's going to say, that's great. Tell me why. Like, what were you feeling? What happened that caused that? It prods and it will dig deeper. We try to do that at least quarterly, if not every 6 months.
Awesome.
And we recognize that as soon as you get bigger than about 10 people, you start to have subcultures, right? If you have a team of 50 people, hopefully you have some sort of org structure, and each within each one of those teams, like the engineering team or the customer service team, while their experiences comes down from the organization that they're a part of, their culture is greatly impacted and affected by who's working there, the type of work they're doing, in systems and processes. And so we not only align with, hey, what's the global organization culture, but also what's the more micro team culture as well.
Because I was wondering about that, because depending upon roles and responsibility, people in a company may have very different views about what defines their current or most desired culture. And I was curious what role do I was curious how you handled that.
Yeah, it becomes right. The team itself greatly affects it, right? I've worked places where the finance team, fits the mold of a traditional finance team. Like everybody else is wearing t-shirts and shorts and they're still in their, like button downs and slacks. And the design team is, like free spirited. And it's important to recognize how different teams are, because the matter of the fact is I don't believe there's such thing as good or bad culture. It's just, is it useful or not? And are people aligned with it or not? Because when, being super free spirited and not wearing shoes in the office, people can thrive. And if people fit that, it's awesome. Like it's magic. If they don't, like it game over. Like the person who joins that's going to be miserable. Everybody else is going to be impacted. And so maybe the shoes in the office is a bad example, but like people who are motivated by actually making the world a better place and not just making money, like the types of people who would volunteer to go plant trees in the local park, like independent of what the work is, like they will rally around things in a certain way. And so it's just the alignment of it that is super important, and less of, hey, what's the right thing here, and more of, okay, what's the right thing for this group of people.
So I'm sure there's people listening with varying degrees of experience and comfort with AI. If there was only one piece of advice you could give, what would it be?
I read this article a couple of weeks ago and it kind of solidified some things I've been thinking about. It was talking about tool shaped objects, that sometimes there's objects that are shaped like tools, but aren't actually tools. And it talked about how with AI, it's super easy to jump into a chat GPT or a Claude, or even if, you're going to get fancier, you go and you use like Manus or something that you actually like does work for you. You can ask it to do things and it can do it. But often it's just doing things. It's not actually solving problems for you. And so you end up with this, the term a lot of people use is AI slop, but you end up with this bloat of like, hey, before it may have taken me 15 minutes to write an email that said what I wanted. And now I'm going to put it into ChatGPT. It's going to write a way longer email. And then I can either send it and it will take somebody else a long time to get it, or they're then using their AI. And so it's really important to recognize, what are the things we're trying to solve? And is this actually making this better? Or do I just feel more productive? This article talked about Farmville, right? The Facebook game where you farm things digitally. And it talked about how you could sit on Farmville all day long playing this game and feel super productive. And yet you have not changed anything in the world. You've not changed anything in your life. It's just been a waste of time and energy. And so just being careful around, okay, there are things that need to be done. And inherently, as human beings, like our fulfillment is driven by creation. And so can we lean into the things that bring us fulfillment and that we are uniquely good at versus trying to automate all of it? Because at the end of the day, it really comes down to, are we happy? Are we happy in the work we're doing? If we're happy, we'll do a great job. And we should use AI. It's an awesome tool. We just need to make sure we're actually using it to make things better and not just faster or to do things for us.
So one of the things we talked about offline was folks that are struggling with getting enough applicants. And I know that it varies based on industry. What's your advice or tips or reminders that you might offer folks that may be struggling with their ability to get more high quality applicants in the first place so they can be selective?
Yeah. Whenever we're working with an organization like this, we say, look, hey, there's two work streams here. One is how do we get applicants this week? And the other is how do we make it so you don't have this problem in 18 months? The longer term problem is get clear on your culture and who you are. Stop tolerating, toxic people. Like be willing to do bold things. Figure out how you compare in the market, get out there, have somebody post on social media, like apply for best places to work, like all of it, go to conferences, all of these, like just become friends with people. All of those things are the long term. The shorter term becomes, well, go through this mental exercise of look at what your job descriptions are and where you're posting them, what you say you care about in them, and then pretend you were an applicant and be like, okay, well, how would they understand it? Is this actually someplace they would want to gamble leaving where they're at to come to? Because if you don't have many applicants, you're going to be finding people who have jobs and who had a bad day and are sitting on their couch at 8 p.m. watching Netflix and going on Indeed and are like, maybe I'll go. And so those are the things with that as well. It's super easy to look at just go on Indeed and search the position and look at, okay, what are the the job descriptions that look good? Which ones seem like they are awesome? And then, use AI. Take yours and take that one and throw it into ChatGPT and say, hey, help me make mine more like this. And it'll do a great job and you can clean it up and change things. But even, getting creative. I have a good friend that, would talk about, he helped grow plumbing companies really quickly. And, he talks about how one of his favorite strategies was on his lunch break every day, he would go to the Home Depot parking lot and just find plumbers sitting in their trucks eating lunch. And he would say, hey, I'll buy you Taco Bell if you'll talk to me. And you go buy him Taco Bell, not to recruit them, just to learn to actually care and become their friends. And then if they didn't, when they had a bad day, they would reach out or they would tell their friends who were complaining to them about like, hey, it sucks to work at company X. And they're like, hey, well, company Y was really cool the other day. They spent $7 on me. They didn't even know me. And
Hmm.
so really it comes back to this. How can you enhance the human connection? And that's how you get short term and long term.
So if people want to know more about you, your company, and the work you do, I know you've got a book that's coming out or is out. What's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, I spend way too much time on LinkedIn. So that's a great place. Also, just our website, hire aligned, HIRE aligned.com. And then you can reach out directly to my email as well with jacob@hirealigned.com.
Cool. Jacob, it is great seeing you. I appreciate all your thoughtfulness and your insight. And it's been a pleasure to have you today. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Yeah, it was great to be here. Thanks, Mason.